I'm on the steering group of Housing Futures, which is the organisation that has brought this event together. I'm also on the steering group of Greater Manchester Housing Action. Welcome to this event on co-housing. This is the second public event of a whole series of public events that Housing Futures is going to be running, and already has run one over the next kind of 6 months. So you can find details of that programme in the handout that we've been given. So each event we've kind of themed around a different theme. So this one's going to be on co-housing. Then we're going to be looking at community land trusts. In September, we're going to be looking at Labour's alternative models of ownership report and the opportunities that presents to kind of the community-led housing movement. We'll then be looking at kind of lessons from the Global South, particularly work in Kenya. And then finally, in November, we'll be launching the report that Housing Futures has commissioned on community-led housing within Greater Manchester. So just to kind of explain a bit more about what Housing Futures is. So Housing Futures is a research partnership between Greater Manchester Housing Action, which is a kind of campaign activist networking organisation on housing in Greater Manchester, and the Urban Institute at the University of Sheffield, and in particular the Realising Just Cities programme within that. So the whole programme has been funded by the Urban Institute, and also we've got support from Manchester University's Urban Institute, which has sponsored this event, so have to give thanks to them. So far, and this partnership that we've brought together specifically to look at the potential of community-led housing, so that's housing cooperatives, co-housing, and community land trusts within Greater Manchester and within the kind of housing provision of Greater Manchester. So what we're doing to kind of bring about that is two things. So first, we've commissioned a researcher to kind of research the state of play in the sector at the moment nationally, and also look at kind of opportunities, policy agendas locally that could be brought to influence and bring about more community-led housing. And then secondly, the other aspect of this is to kind of strengthen the network of everybody interested in or working in the community-led housing sector in Greater Manchester already, and that's partly what these events are for an opportunity for people who are interested to meet and kind of network. And the reason we're doing that is because Greater Manchester actually lacks is a bit further behind nationally compared to other local authorities in the country, where there has been more support for community-led housing, and maybe that will be touched on later today. But also because we think there's a real opportunity with devolution, with the housing agenda that's being pushed forward by Paul Dennett, who's the Mayor of Salford, but also has the housing portfolio for the city region. And we think that now's a real chance to push forward the arguments for community-led housing and get kind of substantial support from local authorities for this. What this is kind of hopefully all going to be building up to after this project Housing Futures is over, which runs to the end of the year, is the launch of a regional hub in Greater Manchester for the national community-led housing network. So these hubs there are a couple around the country already, and we're hoping to kind of launch one in Greater Manchester, which will be a kind of a more permanent organisation that can continue the work we're doing in bringing all of you together and advocating and creating policy reform in this area. So that's all kind of in the future. In the meantime, we've got these events. We will be launching this report that is kind of ongoing in November, and we hope the events themselves are really interesting and informative. And for more information, Housing Futures, as is up there, is on the GMHA website. There's a whole kind of sub-section of the site, or just get in touch with any of us, which I think the details are there. Also, if any of you are on Twitter, there is a hashtag tonight, which is, I think, Housing Futures GM. It's on this. Yeah, Housing Futures GM. So if you're on Twitter and you feel like tweeting, do tweet. Anyway, I'll hand over to Carl now. So thanks for coming, everyone. Yeah.
Not GM Housing Futures as I wrote on there, so just that we need to change that. Okay, so there's a bit of a hashtag confusion. Can everyone hear me? I just wanted to run you through some of the logistics for tonight. So what we're going to have is we're going to have an initial presentation from Rich, who's our resident researcher, and he's going to give you some information, some background to the event. Then we're going to hear from our fellow panelist here, Bill Phelps, who's from Chapeltown Cohousing, Leeds, and he's going to talk to you about their project over there. And then we also have Maria Brenton, who's going to talk to you about senior co-housing. Then we're going to have a little break and a chance for you to all to get to know each other and do a bit of networking. And then we're going to have a Q&A with all the panel. And also after that we're going to have a little chance for you to all network again. So we're going to go to the Old Monkey Pub, which is just down the road on Portland Street, and a chance to just talk through what you've heard tonight and to talk to some of the steering group members over a couple of drinks after the event. Okay, so I just wanted to hand over to Rich, who's our researcher for the GM Housing Futures project.
So I did bring slides, but we can get them.
Can you use microphone, please?
Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Sure. Is this working? Everyone hear me? All right. Brilliant. Okay, so hi, my name is Richard. I'm the research associate working with Housing Futures, just exploring the potential for community-led housing within Greater Manchester. So today I'm just going to start off just by giving a brief overview of co-housing, just to start off the evening. I'm really looking forward to hearing from the other speakers and everyone else this evening. So just to start off with a general overview of co-housing. So co-housing is generally recognised as a specific type of collaborative community-led housing, distinct from others such as housing co-ops or community land trusts. It's not that it's distinct in forms of type of tenure or legal model, and in practice co-housing can be combined with other types of community-led housing. What makes it unique is more its social design features in combining shared and private living spaces. So a typical project might consist of a number of individual houses or flats clustered around a common living space, like a common house shared building, which people might use, say, to do bits of jobs around projects or to just meet together. And usually designed with the intention of encouraging interaction between neighbours. So a single project might try to minimise guidance or maximise people's encounters with one another during the day, just to encourage neighbourly contact. Usually there's around 20 or 30 households in a single project, and they're often formed as part of the intentional community. Sorry, can everyone hear me clearly? Yeah?
No.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant.
Rich, can we just stop and see if anyone can help me?
Yeah.
It won't play the correct.
Yeah. Technical comments.
It's that one. But as soon as I go on and play and type it disappears
You've got the folder open and it's getting the answers, you just
from the desktops.
some of that stuff.
It's this one. It doesn't.
I think it's F4 on that one.
Is F4, is it?
Yeah.
Can I just explain what's happened?
Yeah.
Right. What's happened is your PowerPoint slides are only separate files. They all need to be in one PPS file, so you can run the slideshow. So that they all need merging together into one file.
Can you do that?
Sure, but normally you can just open the separate.
Sharing skills already.
Can I just try this?
Yeah, you need to get them all. We'll need to open them all up, and then paste them all into one file.
I don't know whether is it worth that.
Because otherwise, it's just going to keep bouncing back to the.
It's also the fact that I can't see the screen.
No, screen's not working, is it?
I mean, I can just carry on with that slide.
Yeah, just carry on. But
That's
I'm trying to fix nothing else.
Yeah.
So
If anyone wants them, we can email them.
Okay, let's leave it.
I'll give you my email address and then I'll sort it out.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Right. Oh.
Okay, so just to start off again. So what makes cohousing unique? It's not a specific legal model or a specific type of tenure. It's a design, like the social station design. We usually have around 20 to 40 households in private individual living spaces surrounding kind of like a common shared space, like a meal hall or workshops for the project. So it's built to try and encourage that kind of like neighbourly contacts and togetherness through the actual, operation of how people live together. And the people who found the project might have a joint interest. So, for example, there might be environmentalists looking to explore new ways of long-term living. We can often have like older women or LGBT groups part of the users as well to try and overcome isolation. And houses don't have to be a specific form of tenure, so they can include either rented housing or forms of low-cost home occupation. But a typical project will usually be run on a not-for-profit basis. So cohousing is a specific movement, has origins in Denmark and Sweden in the late 1960s and the early 70s. Early forms in Sweden were called collectivists, which doesn't really need translation, though I don't know if I pronounced that right. There's quite a few of them in Germany as well, which also has a substantial community housing sector, and projects have started up in countries like the US, Australia and Japan. But it's still relatively few in number. Most projects in the UK so far have been privately funded, but there's a range of different approaches internationally. So in Denmark, for instance, a group of people might self-fund a plot of cheap land in a rural area or a small town for transport links. But in Sweden, they're more likely to be state-owned and based in cities, in common with kind of like this significant state intervention in the Swedish housing market. In Germany, a project might often be set up by a partnership between the public body and voluntary and community sector bodies, rather than an autonomous local group. So internationally, there's quite a range of different ways you can set one up. So I did have a diagram, but I'll skip that bit, but it's quite self-evident basically. Around the common project, you'll usually have private individual living spaces, and then kind of like a shared, common house in the middle for people to go down, cooking together, chat, meet up, hold meetings, workshops, and there'll be like, children's communal play areas, common allotments, gardens, and quite a few of them. So it's there, it's built to foster this kind of neighbourly contact between people. So what's the status of co-housing in the UK? Well, the sector's been going here since the late 90s. Just taking some figures off the UK Co-housing Trust website. These might be, there might be a few more up-to-date figures out there, but there's around 19 projects that have been running, with another 60 registered and in development. They're being set up in both rural and urban areas. So, in comparison to other types of community-led housing, particularly housing co-ops, it's still quite small, though there's been growing institutional recognition, including supports like the UK Co-housing Trust, which was set up in 2013. On average in the UK, each project has between 10 and 40 houses, which can either be newly built as part of a specific design, or they can be converted from existing properties. As I mentioned, groups such as older women and LGBT groups have shown particular interest, and in certain other national contexts, like I think in Germany, for instance, I think people involved in refugee groups have also been interested in exploring it. In terms of funding, most projects in the UK so far have been privately funded, so it might involve people borrowing from a bank or another lender to get up and running. There is a community housing fund that's been set up by the government, and that's supposed to make £300 million in funding available between now and 2020. Although the full prospectus hasn't been made available yet. And cohousing, and that's for all community-led housing groups. So co-housing groups would be bidding, be sharing that with housing co-ops and community land trusts and self-help housing. And it might potentially be a bit of a catch in that. Housing associations might be able to bid for it as well, in which case we're still waiting for the details, but that could, if you do get institutionalised social landlords bidding, then that might swallow up some of the funding. So we need to wait just to see what the details are. So briefly, as a quick case study, I just want to give an overview of Lilac in Leeds, which is an example of an urban project, an urban co-housing project. The name Lilac, it stands for Low Impact Living, Affordable Community. It's a group of about 20 eco-houses in the west of Leeds. It's built, hence the name, like, with low impact environmental living and affordability in mind. Just to give you a bit of the timescales involved, the group that set it up first began planning in 2006, incorporated themselves officially in 2009, and then began development in 2012. And people have been living there since 2013, so it can take the best part of a decade to get one up and running. Like I said, it's built explicitly, Lilac's built explicitly with reducing its environmental impacts in mind, so as well as the design of the eco-houses, has things like car sharing and good use of tools and equipment. And as part of living together, they try to eat together like at least twice a week. And Lilac also tries to guarantee affordability through what's called a mutual home ownership society, which is a cooperative model that is developed in concert with the cooperative movement in the Nordics. So this is an example of the overlap you can get between co-housing and other types of community-led housing. Through the model, I won't go into too many details, but the idea is that you have a special not-for-profit society, kind of like a cooperative, that owns the land, owns a freehold on the land. And the idea is that the society owns both the land and the houses with the aim of removing those from the immediate housing market. So you remove them from speculation and land inflation. And then the leases that owns out to the society's members in exchange for paying back an equity share. How many shares people hold is based on how much they can afford and the build cost of their home. So with the payments covering the mortgage for the home and any maintenance costs and extra project costs for life. How much you pay is set by your income. So the idea is that everybody, no matter what they earn, pays 35% of the net income until they pay off the shares. And for people who are quite high earners, they'll be paying what they pay, pays off both the shares and goes into like an extra pot for the group to use for collective projects. And the idea is that it's a low-cost form of home ownership because the usual rule of thumb is that about a third of your disposable income going on housing costs is affordable. Though there's been questions as well about how affordable it can be for people who either A, don't have savings, or B, aren't earning a middle income, because Lilac is a self-funded project, the sums still need to add up, you still need to pay back the bank at the end of the day, and the society still needs to break even for the model to work. So, just to end, given the times of the evening, co-housing, prospects and challenges, I wanted to throw out some questions and potential discussion about co-housing. I think in the review of co-housing we've been looking at, it shows that a lot of projects have themselves just seem really, really valuable for helping the groups that have been involved. And there have been criticisms that co-housing is just another form of private community, like a gated community, but I think that can be unfair. Partly because of the way the project is set up to encourage communal living, and also because the way a lot of projects will try to have contact, with people living in the neighbourhood around them, and have that get involved in that. I think in terms of challenges, there is a lot of effort involved. It seems successful groups, like I said, seem to take an average of 5 to 7 years. There's quite a high attrition rate of groups who try to set up and can't for one reason or another. And as well as setting up, there's also the importance in keeping the project going with what some people call like the social architecture. Being able to ensure that projects like collaborative and communal and equitable people in practice, people get listened to. There is more support available now to help groups set up, like I mentioned, the government's Community Housing Fund, which is coming available sometime, and there's also a lot more groups out there that do offer support, like the Co-Housing Trust. Although there can be questions about how to make sure the groups are still able to self-determine how they want the projects to go. It is becoming a bit of a professionalisation of support, which is really an issue for community-led housing in general. Both contemporary housing cooperatives and community land trusts.
And we can also, what I found was interesting among some kind of like, maybe like hardcore housing co-op people, there can be some questions about whether the balance of co-housing is right, whether having private living spaces is perhaps more individualised than we can get in some co-ops. And there's also questions about affordability, as I said, especially in the absence of public funding, and how you can make housing genuinely affordable. For people on low incomes, people who'd be living on housing benefit, or might be trying to get into social housing, or might be in the low end of the private rental sector. So I think that is a concern. In general, though, I do find it really impressive the number of different routes that can make use of co-housing and how people can define the project. So I'm really interested to hear from everyone else in the panel and people in the room today. Just about people's experiences and what they found. Yeah, thanks.
Brilliant, thanks Rich. We have Bill Feltz from Chinatown Co-Housing now. Bill, I think you also have a presentation, so we'll just have a couple of seconds to get that set up. We've got your stick.
It was copied across to the desktop.
We're going to try a different laptop, so
Oh, I
we
see.
can
Right.
So there we go.
I shall have to pat my pockets until I find it.
Sorry, everybody.
Yeah, it's going to be a listening and technical issue, I think, to get sorted.
Right.
Got it?
Yep. Do you want me to come down? Oh, right.
As you was a bit hidden, was that actually? Yeah, you might patch off and show. I don't know if we want to actually swap this around, Marie, because you don't have slides, do you? So it might be worth us. It might be worth us going with someone who actually is, very technology light. So if we actually could have Maria's talk first, then is that?
I hate PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the long-web projector at transparency.
Yeah.
Not sure what it is,
This doesn't seem to go any lower. Are you picking me up?
Yeah.
Good, okay. Maria Brenton, I'm the UK Cohousing Network's Senior Co-Housing Ambassador, a woman of some exalted station, as you can see. I've been involved with the network since it began. I'm also associated with the just getting going Greater London Authority Community-Led Housing Information Hub. So, I'd say, in the absence of my slides, you would get an awful lot more pictorial information from our website, which is ouch.org.uk, OWCH, Older Women's Co-Housing, ouch.org.uk, and we have actually commissioned a couple of films which you can access on that site in order to fend off visitors, of whom we have had hundreds. And the other thing that is available through it is a paper that I wrote for the Housing Learning Improvement Network on the long journey that Ouch had to set up in its co-housing community in High Barnet at the end of 2016, 18 years. But it gave us a lot of time for community building, and that's what the paper is about. So, as said earlier, co-housing is the most social of all the community-led housing models, really. So, the beginning, I'm going to talk about Ouch, about how they moved into their place after a very long time. But I wanted to set the context first, and there was a useful quote I took from The Guardian this morning from an article by a social entrepreneur. When people feel supported by strong relationships, change happens. And when we make collaboration and connection feel simple and easy, people want to join in. Yet our welfare state does not try to connect us one to another. So, basically that's an indictment of the welfare state, which I share really. I think that we've come to depend too much on what's left of the welfare state in this country, and it has disinhibited people from doing things for themselves and with each other. And if you take social housing as one example of that, It's very much a sort of top-down managed model where the tenants don't have much say. Housing associations, additionally, have become increasingly huge organisations that do things unto people. The biggest ones, Hanover and Anchor, are just about to merge. Expect somebody chief executive salary to get even longer. So, very big organisations, which you can argue for from economies of scale point of view, etc. But in relation to the people they work for, they do tend to continue and perpetuate the distressing tendency we have in our particular culture to feel that we're in a position to do things to people, particularly old people. Now, I'm going to talk tonight about co-housing being an example of co-production. Now, that's a word that's coming slowly into use in social services and care services and whatnot. And properly understood, it's about a shift of power, where responsibility and resources are moved from the professionals to the individuals that the services are all about, involving them in their own services. That's something that in the housing sphere is quite difficult for housing associations to do and for most developers to do. They don't really interact, they don't know how to interact with their end users, except at the marketing phase when they're trying to sell them something, and then they'll schmooze all over them. But until then, you have not got a voice. Co-housing is giving you a voice. So, in relation to the old are a part of the population who everybody thinks should be patronised and patted on the head and done unto. And if the Ouch Group has a motto, it's "We shall not be done unto." So they're the first and only senior co-housing group in the whole country. And it took us so long because we arrived in a world that didn't recognise co-housing, where every institution in the housing sector seemed set against us, and where there was no infrastructure of support whatsoever. That infrastructure of support is just growing with the community-led housing movement, I'm glad to say. But it's taken us nearly 20 years. So the demographics of old age are something that we really need to adhere to here, to recognise here. Co-housing is really needed in this country. Older people and loneliness are almost synonymous. All the surveys show that at least 1 million older people feel lonely most of the time. Patterns of living over the last few decades mean that more and more single households, more and more people living on their own, and also the demographic is changing in the sense that people who are over 65 these days are quite a lot of them, nearly just over a quarter, are childless. And there's around 1 million older people who are childless and have no families to look after them, and that is only going to increase by 2030. So there's a care gap. And much of the literature around these days is saying that we need to find new ways of providing care, of doing care. The social services have dwindled under this government to a point where they only deal with risk and they only deal with the last resort and 15 minutes if you're lucky. So the new ways of care, giving care and doing care that we ought to be thinking about are around reciprocity and mutualism, which is what co-housing is all about. Now, if we come to what Ouch was looking for, Ouch was a group of older women who were living scattered all over London, who reckoned, because they were living alone, that they were at risk or would be at risk. Our sole remaining founder member, who's now 88, was living up 27 steps in a nice part of London, I grant you, but up 27 steps, and she broke her leg not long before we moved. So the vulnerability of older people spread around without instant family contact with families or children, if they have them, far away, is something that is addressed by senior co-housing. Now, I referred earlier to the long time it took us to get where we are, which is a lovely, lovely building off the High Street in High Barnet. 25 flats for 26 women, has won something like 8 architectural design awards already. The design was participated in by us, and it's a great place, a lovely place, serene place to live. But the sense of community that we have kitted it out with was not easily arrived at. A sense of community does not spontaneously generate just because you put a whole load of people under one roof who may or may not share a characteristic like old age or frailty or whatever. You have to work at it, and we did work at it. And the paper that I referred to earlier that you can find on the Housing Learning Improvement Network tells something of that process. So I'll happily answer questions later. We had a different funding model from the one that Lilac has. Part of the reason it took us so long was that the group was very insistent that they included older women who did not have the means to buy. So it's mixed tenure. There are 17 leasehold flats and 8 social rental flats, and the whole development was, in the end, after decades and decades of trying, front-funded and developed by Hanover Housing Association. I think it was their first and their last co-housing community. They show no sign whatsoever of doing it again. Now, they had quite a learning curve, and we had quite a learning curve with them. We participated. We sat in, 2 of us sat in on every meeting of the construction company, the architects, the project developers, site managers, etc. We had to learn a lot of technical stuff. They had to learn to actually answer our questions and to treat us like we mattered, which wasn't part of their usual sort of way of working. They actually did very well, I have to say. They learned. So, the social rental flats were funded for us by a charity. That, I'm afraid, is not replicable by other groups, which is a great pity. We would not have happened as a mixed tenure group if we hadn't had that spare million at that particular point. What it did do for us was release us from any obligation to let the local authority meddle and nominate us tenants, because they've tried very hard to stop us going there in the first place, and we didn't think that they'd be all that cooperative in assuring us people who wanted to live in co-housing as our rental tenants. So we allocate the tenancies, but they are managed by a very small housing association in partnership with the Ouch Group. What the group had to learn was to translate the dreams that they talked about for so many years into reality. And that's been quite challenging. I think even people's notion of what's personal space and what's communal varies between individuals, and they had to kind of adjust to that in their group, between them. They also had to learn to manage a very sophisticated modern building. We didn't quite expect it to be as sophisticated as it is. Got all sorts of technical and electronic equipment and self-opening windows when there's a fire and all that kind of stuff that we are responsible for as a group. The whole thing is managed by the Ouch community themselves. They take all their decisions by consensus, and there's a small elected management committee. And then all the functions around the place and the garden are distributed between a whole load of service teams that we set up when they moved in at the end of 2016. So they have actually developed a lovely garden. And the chores and cleaning and management of all kinds of resources is done by the group itself. So they've had to learn new skills. They've had to develop themselves a procurement policy. They've had to tender for and hire a managing agent to look after the communal areas like boiler upkeep and health and safety and fire alarms and all that kind of stuff. So the whole reason they've done it, which was to be a mutually supportive community of women, is what has worked beautifully. They have at least 3 people with serious cancer at the moment, 2 of whom have had recent surgery. And there's absolutely no question, but they will, when they're brought home from hospital by one of the women who's got a car, they will have their meals delivered to them, they will have their shopping done, their prescriptions fetched for them, everything that they will need. So immediately a care rota goes into work and they are supported. Their families in attendance are actually a bit redundant, which is very nice. So the defining characteristic of a co-housing community is shared meals. You don't necessarily get those in cooperatives, and therefore it has to be a size where you can have a shared meal is an enjoyable experience. I mean, 300 of you is not. 20 to 30 of them every week having a communal meal cooked by a team of 4 of them on a rota basis is the kind of glue that keeps them together. There has been a lot of stress. They've only just got rid of, well, I don't think they've entirely got rid of, the construction firm. They moved in before Christmas 2016, and the construction firm has been addressing all the things it got wrong, like their balcony floors were the wrong way around. Like all of them they've had 26 new boilers in the last month. 26 new Bosch boilers. So that's been stressful. The constant announcement of move-in day kept getting put back by the construction firm. So they sold their houses in March 2016, and then they had to sofa surf or find somewhere to live. Women in their 80s and 70s, pets put in store, furniture put in store, and people bouncing from one door to spare bedroom to somebody else's sofa. Very, very stressful. So we have got a research project going, which we're hoping to get lots of money for, to do a 5-year study to see whether that initial stressful start will iron out to be what we've always claimed co-housing was, which is something that keeps older people happier, healthier, more active, and therefore less likely to make calls on the health and social services. So watch this space.
Great, thanks very much, Maria. So we've got Bill Phelps here from Chapeltown Co-housing Leeds. So have we got Bill's slides up there then? Brilliant, okay, thank you. This is how it should work.
Can you hear me all right? Okay? Fantastic. So I live in Sheffield, and I suppose, well, it's an area sort of rich in diversity but fairly low in sort of income. The equivalent area in Manchester would it be Moss Side? Okay. So can we have the next slide, please? Thanks. So that's the street where I currently live, Grange Avenue. There's a lot of contrast in Chapeltown. So you get rows and rows and rows of red brick terraces and back-to-backs. But just down the road, next slide, please. So yeah, looks sort of stockbroker Chapeltown. There's some playing fields sort of right next to where we're going to be developing our co-housing project that you saw on the first slide. So the origins of it, we've been going 8 years, which is nothing really, compared with Ouch. So 8 years ago, a group of long-term Sheffield Town residents, we decided we wanted to build a co-housing community of around 30 homes. And if we'd known then that the cost was going to be about 5 million, we'd probably have come to our senses or started buying lottery tickets. But we were ignorant, so that was fine. We didn't know what we were letting ourselves in for, so we just went ahead. And the dream of a more community-based way of living sort of gave us the impetus to get started. That and the inspiration of having Lilac just over the other side of the city, about 5 miles away. Without them, we would never have got going. So we talked a bit about what co-housing is. I think the essence of it really is this careful balance of privacy and sharing. And this is Richard's diagram that he didn't have. There's the next slide, please. Oh, no, sorry, which one's that? Oh, yes, that one. Thank you. Yeah. So, so this is the cluster of private homes around a large shared garden and a common house with a large dining area, kitchen, guest rooms, a laundry, maybe a workshop or playroom. So that's a typical co-housing setup. And essentially that's what we're going for too. And essentially what Lilac have. And Lancaster co-housing. And presumably Ouch as well. the typical UK co-housing diagram in there.
Not quite.
Okay, we'll save this for the panel later maybe. So it's an intentional community, but nowhere near as scary as a full-blown commune. There's a commitment to mutual support, sharing the responsibility to keep the show on the road, but all the community activities like eating together once or twice a week, they're entirely optional, and everyone has their own front door that they can shut when they feel they need time to themselves. So this is community light. It's a great antidote to loneliness, as Maria has said, and social isolation, but it won't suit everyone. Next slide, please, and that is Lilac. And we've got an open day, a learning day, on the 14th of July, so if you want to get a flavour of what co-housing actually feels like on the ground, just other side of the Pennines, book in, Google Lilac co-housing, you'll find it, and there's an Eventbrite form to sign up on. Well worth a visit. They've been going for 5 years now, and as I said, they're one of our main sources of inspiration. It took us 3 years to find a suitable site, and then another 2 to persuade Leeds City Council, the owners, that we were a serious buyer. Next slide, please. Meanwhile, yeah, that's one of our socials. So we've been busy drawing in members, designing our houses, badgering local politicians, assembling our professional team, and learning from other groups that have set up similar schemes. Now, Lilac's financial model, this mutual home ownership scheme, is quite complex, and it wasn't going to work for us despite the fact that we won various awards. We needed a model that would work for people without capital and for people on benefits. And we've always wanted Chaco to reflect the diversity of Chapel Town, so that implies affordability too. So how do we make sums add up? In practice, only about a third of our homes will be fully rented. We prefer half, but we can't afford that. And the rest will be shared ownership, with the residents owning anything from 25% up to 99% of their home. We're a housing co-op, so none of us can own our own homes outright. So in addition to the finance that these members bring in via mortgages or savings, Homes England, what used to be the Homes and Communities Agency, they're giving us £360,000 to support the creation of 8 shared ownership homes for people in housing need. That £360,000 comes at quite a price in terms of having to jump through all their hoops it really sort of cuts across what we're trying to do as a co-op. Their rules almost seem designed to make lots of capitalists. Another vital piece of the finance jigsaw is a set of short-term unsecured loans. Because we're a housing co-op, it's loan stock we're talking about here. We realised we needed to raise about £600,000 in loan stock from friends and family and people who believed in what we were doing. So we launched into that, and amazingly, we achieved it. Even more amazing is the fact that the day before we launched our loan stock offer, our local sort of community-led housing hub, Leeds Community Homes, launched a share offer trying to raise £360,000 to build 16 affordable homes next to the River Aire, a big development. And so the timing was really unfortunate. Both groups, we realised this, but between us, we both managed to achieve our targets. And so within the space of 9 months or so, we managed to raise £1 million in Leeds for community-led housing. So there's a lot of people out there who actually believe in the sorts of things we're trying to do, which is fantastic. So what makes a good co-housing site? Next slide, please. Right, so that's Lancaster Co-housing on the banks of the River Loon. Is the block, so we've got a sort of banana-shaped terrace that's helping to block off the noise and the pollution from the A58, so we've got a comparatively quiet back garden. Obviously the houses will be sort of well sound insulated and insulated. And then sort of set back from towards the back of the garden, we've got this sort of common house area, which is, so it's the ground floor of 3 blocks, and then above we've got some 2-bed flats. It might actually help at this stage. No, let's go on to the next slide. We got planning permission last September, but only after we, the planners had us over a barrel when they said no way were they going to let us have the sort of rather trendy sort of metal and timber finish that we had. They said if we didn't do it in brick and render, they would recommend refusal, which I don't think they're supposed to do, particularly as this is the inside, this is not visible from the outside at all. So that we've spent a long time in sort of consensus decision-making meetings, sort of deciding what we wanted the backs of the houses to look like. And that was trashed by the planners, which I'm still a bit annoyed about. So we're now just a gnat's crotchet away from buying the land and signing the building contract. We've been in that position for the last 6 months. It feels like that. Mainly because Homes England are very slow at signing off the grant that they awarded us. So it looks like the earliest we'll be moving in is the end of next year. Next one. Yeah. So this is the site. This is some of us who are doing some filming for a documentary on community-led housing. Rather chilly day there. And then, sort of seemingly out of nowhere, sort of the curveball comes, and that's the next slide. Dixon's Trinity Academy want to build 1,000 pupil school, through school, right next to it. So you can see just on the sort of right there, our curve of terrace. And our common house is more or less sort of in the middle of the rear behind the school. So they want to build this 3-story thing that's going to block out light in the summer evenings from our garden. They've got the playground on the other side next to our fence. And so the second, so it's primary and secondary in one building. and they're going to be, this is sounding very NIMBY-ish, isn't it? They're going to be, secondary school kids going to be peering down into our garden and houses, and it's going to add an extra 250 cars a day to an already busy street. So for the last month or so, we've been sort of campaigning, going door to door, getting support and objection letters in to the planners to say, they've got to think again about this. We want a new school, but putting them there is not only going to cause a lot of problems for us, it's also going to create complete chaos for the local traffic. And they bought plenty of more land the other side of the main road where they could put the secondary school. So we always knew there was going to be we thought there was going to be a primary school there. We didn't realise it was going to be primary and secondary combined on a very tight site. So that's been our one thing we've been sort of campaigning against recently. I'll leave it there. Just say we're just part of a movement. So there's lots of other people in the area trying to set up co-housing. The Shangri-Leeds, Hotley CLT, Bradford Co-housing, your space in York, and it's a tremendous encouragement having all these other groups working together. I love coming to events like this, just finding out other people who are sort of wrestling with the same set of issues or similar issues, swapping notes and things. I find these sorts of events really inspiring. So thanks for inviting me.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Bill. Thanks, Maria. I've got loads of notes actually, probably loads of questions. We've got a 10-minute break now. Maria Brenton from Ouch and from Bill Phelps from Chapeltown Co-housing. Now, we've been joined on the panel here by Pam Flynn from Much, which is Manchester Urban Co-housing, and from Steve Goslin from Cholton Co-housing. They'll both tell you more about their organisation. So I'm just going to give Pam 5 minutes to talk about her, just quickly give you a description of Much and what they're doing. Then we're going to open it up to the panel and open up some questions from the audience.
Okay. Sorry. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay, good, thank you. Well, I'm going to start with the Greater Manchester Age-Friendly Strategy. I know that these seminars are of interest to people all over the region and outside, but I want to start with Greater Manchester and its age-friendly strategy, because Much is a project for people aged over 50. It's an intentional community for people aged over 50. So, Greater Manchester's age-friendly strategy has got 12 headline statements. I'm going to give you 2 of them. Establish age-friendly communities across Greater Manchester, promoting volunteering and bringing generations together. And the second one I'm going to highlight is increase housing choice to promote social connections and well-being in later life. Maria touched on social connection, and the GM age-friendly strategy, or the combined authority, has produced a nice graphic. I'll just wave it at you. 2 pages. It's all in development. The implementation plan is in development. So that's one to keep an eye on, the combined authority and its age-friendly strategy. But at least housing gets a mention. And that binds, as you know, 10 local authorities into thinking about age-friendly housing and housing choice and social connections. Second document I'm just going to wave at you is Ageing Well, a housing manifesto. It's being produced by the Older People's Housing Champions, a national network of older activists who support action by older people's groups to improve housing and related services for an ageing population across England. So if you're over 50, ageing means you, because you've got less time to go than you've already had, almost certainly. And you're getting older every second you sit there listening to me. But anyway, who are much? The flyer for much is on the table over there. There's a little A5 version and a big A4 one. You could do me a really big favour if you live in Manchester, which is take away the A4 one and put it on a notice board somewhere. It's also available as a PDF, and we can share it with you. So, a couple of minutes to rattle through where we are, what we've done. We're an intentional community of older people. We formed in June 2013. We're a limited company. We've been meeting monthly for 5 years. We've got a diverse range of skills, and somebody talked about translating dreams into reality. I think that was Maria, and community building. And for the last 5 years, we've, amongst other things, such as trying to find land, we have been building our community and working to translate our dreams. It's a great team project. That's the thing about co-housing, it's a great team project. We're constantly upskilling. We've learned to look at websites, contribute to websites, go onto social media, get onto Twitter, establish principles of eco-design, and so on and so on. We've done research, checking in with other projects. So we've been up to Lancaster, we've been to Lilac. We've also had the good fortune to go twice to Loppukuri and to Kotisatama, which are 2 projects in Helsinki. And if you really want to see co-housing for older people in action, go to Helsinki. It's fantastic. In checking in with other projects, why do you do it? Well, for me and for us in Much, it's about peer support. Bill talked about the support he had from Lila. And whether or not the model is the same doesn't really matter. It's about working through the knotty problems and trying to sort things out. We're also in contact with regional and local policymakers. As a Manchester project, we're in touch with Manchester and its housing strategy, and I think it's entirely welcome that Paul Dennett is now leading a housing strategy for 10 local authorities. I think it's a great opportunity for Greater Manchester. We have a partnership with Great Places Housing Group, and the issues now for us, we're in the development stage, moving towards implementation. The 3 big issues: finding land, securing the money, and making the legal agreements. We know that this is all going to be quite knotty, wet towel round the head stuff, and have ice poured on you, and so on and so on. But on the way, we have a lot of shared food and hopefully a lot of laughter. Sean is here, also from Much, and in the informal part of this, we hope to be able to answer your questions. And now, obviously. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Pam. Steve, I don't know if you want to give a sort of a quick, similar thing or...
Yeah, I can be very quick. Yeah, I was only just asked to come up here, so
yeah,
I
thanks
haven't
very
prepared
much.
anything in advance. But my name is Steve Gosling. I'm from a small co-housing group called the Chorlton Co-housing Group in Manchester. And people know Chorlton, it's about 3 miles from the city centre. It's quite kind of mixed but reasonably well-to-do inner suburb, I suppose. And we've been, I suppose, quietly getting on with things and meeting as a group of 6 older households for about 3 years. And we have formed ourselves as a limited company. And we've deliberately kept our group quite small because we want to stay and grow older in the area where we live at the moment. And the housing market is very, very tight. There's very limited supply of land. So we've kind of had the strategy of saying, well, we'll stay small, so if something comes up that fits our needs, that would be just right. But if we were bigger, we'd have to disappoint some of the members. But
we have the scope to grow if other opportunities come along. So I guess we were motivated by, quite inspired by what you said, Maria, by this idea of social connectedness and loneliness and what happens when people get over the inevitable and so on. And the idea that life must be better than ending up on your own in a large house where your family have moved away, or if you have family, and so on. So the idea that mutuality and mutual support, being neighbourly, sharing some things where you choose to share in life, there's a better life to be had. So that was a kind of the motivation of the small group of members who came together. And we do have the benefit of being owner-occupiers, and there's capital in order to invest in self-funding and development. But also, if we were to do that, we're freeing up houses in that community for families where there's also demand. So that's a sort of a kind of idea of, call it downsizing. I think people also call it right-sizing. There isn't that much of that goes on, and there is capacity within communities to do things differently if there are choices for people. And I think what we're doing is trying to lead our own way and determine our own futures and make our own choices and try and develop something. The challenge, I think, and it's great when you hear that people have got land and got planning permission and so on, because that's when things really get started. We've had a couple of false starts. We got as far as the Housing Association putting a bid in for some land for us. We got quite excited about that. But a private developer came in and cut the margins and paid a higher price. And I think that's one of the challenges that many co-housing groups come up with, is trying to do something in a market where private companies can come in and just, land bank or work on the expectation that values will increase, whereas social investors are much more difficult to do that. We're feeling confident and reasonably kind of emboldened at the moment, because in the area where we live, the council are consulting on the planning framework for 3 sites that are due to come on the market, and they've got quite different feel about them, but it's getting us involved in a consultation and discussion with local members, with the council officers, and we're hoping that in a way things have changed in Manchester, where there has been very much an emphasis on sites being made available for large owner-occupied homes. Executive homes is the term that's been used for one of the recent sites. It feels like it's being pushed back, and it feels like the times are changing. I think the age-friendly strategy is helping, but it feels like sometimes like a piece of paper as far as housing is concerned. But maybe the tide is turning, and there's a bit more listening to the idea of people determining their own futures, coming up with their own housing solutions, and actually by supporting each other, actually creating communities that become more mutually supportive. And I suppose part of me cynical, that takes pressure off public funding as well in terms of social care and community care and so on. But it does feel as if the times are moving, and perhaps co-housing is becoming an idea whose time has come. I've spoken too much, sorry about that, Mr. Steve. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Steve. Thanks for that, and to Pam. I want to open up now in terms of questions. So we have any questions from the audience, and I'll just take them in a group, and then the panel can address them. Go ahead, Mr. Welcome.
I've got 2 related questions. The first one's for you, Maria. So you talked a little bit about how you were working with the Greater London authorities to develop some sort of information hub. Can you expand on that, and also detail a little bit about the local authority tinkering that you mentioned going on? And the next one is more broadly about local authority involvement and their place. We are doing the Aging Well strategy, but to be honest, there's a wealth of documents, national, regional and local level, which talk about the benefits of housing, well-being and health. That's not the problem. The problem is about delivering that, and about accessing money. So, I mean, everyone realises it's a good idea, but every conversation in government at the moment about housing is dominated by numbers, and because housing is quite a niche subject, you get lost out to private developers and wave big checks. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts about the way forward and challenges.
Could you give your name and if you're from any housing organisation or anything?
Yeah, my name's Jack Gold and I work for Tameside Council's housing department.
Brilliant, thank you. If you don't mind, I'll just take another question then. Yeah, brilliant.
I just wanted to ask Bill if you thought about keeping any parts of the old building, and also if you could tell us a bit more about the self-storage.
Right, and what was your name and where you're from?
My name's Colin, and we did actually look at a proposal of co-housing project in the Range, where we did get local authority support. They offered it initially,
Great, okay. Are there any more from the board before I go back to the panel? Okay. Do you want to take the next question?
Yes, good. I'll take this one. Barnet, you might or might not know, is the most right-wing council in the whole of London, and they've outsourced everything that moves to Capita. When we got our site there in early 2010, it was an old school, been empty for some time, and we were told immediately that our planning commission would be opposed by adult social care, because they wouldn't want a group of older women moving into their borough who might make demands on their social care budget. And the fact that they could say that is ridiculous. I mean, 26 women individually could move into the borough of Barnet, nobody could say a word. Anyway, we had a lot of struggle with their middle managers in housing and social services who kept saying, we've got sheltered housing already. Got almshouses already. We said, we're not almshouses, we're not sheltered housing. Listen, it was only when I got in to see a new adult social care director and got her to write to the planning committee that we actually got anywhere. But they made us market the whole place as a school and invite every free school that was around North London to come in and inspect it, see whether they might like it instead of us. So it put another year, 2 years onto our whole process, really. And we were, when we started, in a cheap construction period, and when we finished, we were in an expensive construction period. So that's Barnet. I think they're atypical, and I think there are local authorities in the country who do get it, and who are helpful and friendly. The other thing was about Greater London Authority. This is the forerunner of the other hubs around the country. The mayor put in 250 grand, and the some of the London councils kicked in another 250 grand. And this is to set up an information source, and the website is being created as we speak, for community-led housing of all kinds, to access the kind of professional advice and support and guidance that my group lacked 18, 19 years ago. And it's just appointed a director called Lev Kerimov, and they've had their first day of accreditation training for advisors. I was at it week before last. They're going to accredit a whole lot of advisors in different skill sets, like somebody could advise you on planning, somebody to advise you on business plans, somebody to advise you on raising finance, mobilizing capital, and that kind of stuff. The likes of me to advise on community building. So they're feeling their way, but it's a good start.
Right, I think Pam also wanted to come in on the issue about money, essentially, that Jack asked. So.
Well, actually, it is an answer for Jack, but it's not about the money. I heard your question as being about what can local authorities do and how to implement a strategy. And the alternative to actually working on age-friendly is to say to older people, go away and die. Because some people would like us to do that. It solves the problem. There wouldn't be any room for the ashes, but the problem of social care would be solved just like that. Go away and die. But today's elders, and looking around this room, there's a few of us here, we grew up with the welfare state. We grew up in a society that was about never making the mistakes of the past again and getting off the situation where people went into debt to get medical care. Now we're having to fight for that now, but we also grew up with a sense of entitlement. And we're buggers, you know. We're hanging on to that sense of entitlement. And we're not going away and we're not shutting up. And that's why we want decent housing. But I'll cut the polemic and I'll move to the local authority and what can it do? We all know that Greater Manchester is bust. It's pretty bust. There isn't any new money, or very little new money for anything. And all the local authorities are from a particular political party. That particular party is very conservative about raiding its reserves. I don't know why, because it's there to serve the people. But anyway, what it can do is not underestimate the value of a statement of support. Bill in particular talked about a real patchwork of funding that Chapeltown put together. Lilac's funding is immensely, it's a simple model, but it's quite complex to operate. You need to be very, very skilled with a spreadsheet. But actually a statement of support from the local authority in theory will open doors in London and will open doors for banks and all the other kind of agencies that Cohousing in development has to talk to. And I would urge you as a local authority officer, please don't get despondent because you've hung on in there till now and you know, we can look for better times and in the meantime there are people working on some hopefully very interesting solutions of which co-housing is one.
Just a very, very simple thing, but one of the things I don't see local authorities doing is actually asking its population what it would like to see in terms of where they'd like to live, either now or in the future. You know, and you know, there's been lots of initiatives over here, I think particularly about older people, you know, sort of downsizing, shelter housing it grew in the 60s and 70s. But did anyone really say, well, when I get older or when I live into a district, what would I like to see in terms of the design of where I live, the neighbourhood, the community, the opportunities for people to get together? So we're kind of, this is the top-down approach, I think, that Maria talked about. It does feel as if there is this movement happening, and it's not just housing, it's people-powered health, it's the Greater Manchester Health Authority looking at ways in which communities can actually start to come up with their own solutions. I do think, and I have worked for a housing association for many, many years, I've kind of lost the plot on that somewhat as well. Because it's about small scale, it's about where you live, it's what's around the corner, it's where you want to you know, what's important to you. And they're very simple human things about connectivity and so on. Loneliness is a massive issue, and co-housing's got an awful lot to say about that. But there should be a whole spectrum of things from co-housing to neighbourhoods where people actually have got the opportunities to share space, really. You know, so that I think it's something that housing needs to be in that mix of the whole loneliness, social care, health, and community development agenda. It's one small thing, but it's got some big, strong messages.
Have you heard of the Local as a Max planning forums?
No.
Local as a Max 2011 coalition thing.
Sorry.
The Local as a Max brought with it the ability to have neighbourhood local planning forums. Councils don't always like them very much, but it means that you can bring together your diocese or local community group and influence the local plan via a neighbourhood plan, which is your plan, and then you've got the local plan, which is the council's plan. So there are some in Manchester, not many. There's more in Leeds and things, but it's worth looking into.
Okay.
I heard the queue was more or less failed.
Leamington failed.
They tried to get them to go into the community.
I was just saying, right.
Basically, just about fun.
Brilliant.
Castlefields on the website. They manage somehow, but I think the councils don't have to acknowledge them.
Right. I just wanted to not forget Colin's question, because Bill, you were asked that about whether you used existing properties or that'd be another thing to us.
And just sort of follow on to what councils can be doing. If there's every council, I believe, has to have a register of self-build sites, and so ideally the officer who would be in charge, given that the task of maintaining that list, could also, if they could be a champion for community-led housing and some alternative approaches to housing, that would be tremendous. And that's more or less what's happening in Leeds. That's making a tremendous difference. The way to do it is to work on your ward councillors and to persuade them first, and then get them to try and introduce and make sure this is coming. Yes, your question about the old building that was on the site. Yeah, the council told us that they were going to demolish that building, and the demolition cost was going to be best part of £1 million. And we said, hold it, maybe we can move in here. And so we managed to get them to delay the demolition whilst we took an architect and a quantity surveyor around, and we've got a sort of a quick and dirty estimate of what it would cost to do the new build scheme on a brownfield site, or to refurbish that old building and bring it up to sort of suitable standard. And in fact, our preference before we got the figures back was to go for use the old building, because we get so much community space for free, because it's absolutely massive. But when the figures did come back, it was going to cost us £300,000 more to refurbish the old building than to just start from a brownfield site. And also it meant that we could actually design precisely what we wanted, rather than, the old building was just too close to the road. There wasn't really enough room for sort of garden space. So it would have been quite a compromise. It would have been quite fun. We'd have looked much more like a hippie commune if we sort of moved into that old building. We'll look much more conventional than the new ones. And the other thing was about self-build properties. Are you interested in buying one?
I'm just really interested in self-build. It doesn't seem to be very much of it in the cities. And so I just kind of wondered, how restricted are they, what they can build, and how does it go?
We've got planning permission for the whole site, including those 4 self-build sites, and provided that there are various constraints on what people can do there. So it's for, I think, up to 4-bed houses for each of those. If somebody wanted to deviate from that, they would then probably have to put in a fresh planning application themselves for that. But if you've got spare 50,000 would like to be our neighbours, then get in touch.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. We've got any more questions from the audience then? I'll just take them. So I think Debbie had a hand up first.
I absolutely support what you've done on college stories, so we should make a film about that. It's amazing. It's the British mentality. How do we fight that? The view that the Englishman's increasingly large castle and the conspicuous consumption of increasingly splendid isolation is the mark of success, and to walk away from all that and to downsize and live a shared life and all of that is somehow a mark of failure or quitting, or not a mark of success. How do we kind of convince people that that sort of British obsession is actually not very good for people in the long run? And if you could sell it to people as something that will make you live longer, be mentally more well, be healthier in every way, what is this miraculous thing? Oh, it's shared living.
very quickly, I'd say let's have more worked examples. So the more different examples of co-housing, community-led housing, cooperative housing we can have, and try and get them more mainstream, then the easier it is to get the message across.
And I think we had two more questions over here then. Sorry, what was your name? Sorry.
I'm Maggie Joan Haggis. I'm working on what I describe as the golden elders version of the Youth Hostel Association. But I'm interested in intergenerational housing cooperatives. Has anybody in the panel come across anybody else who's talking about that? I describe myself as a property-rich, cash-poor golden elder living in a house I can no longer afford to run. But I have lots of young people I know who don't have the bank of mum and dad, have no chance to take control of their housing. So I want to look at how you can put together older people who don't want to do equity release, don't want to relocate, don't want to live with a load of old people. Because I've lived with young people since I was young. So, intergenerational housing cooperatives, anybody?
Thank you.
Any knowledge on it? No.
Thank you.
No, so nobody else is talking about it. Okay.
No, thank you. We'll come to
None
your
of
question.
you, anyway. All right,
Come to
you
your
go.
question.
Okay, one
And then, sorry, did you have a question?
No.
No? Okay, brilliant. Was that okay? Yeah. Sorry, please.
I'm Jerry Stone and I'm from the Seedley and Langworthy Trust. And I just
Can't
want,
hear you.
Sorry, I'm Jerry Stone and I'm from the Seedley and Langworthy Trust. And I just wanted to ask, you know, land trusts and that have been around a long time and this kind of notion's been a long time. And, you know, 20 years ago when I was more engaged at that time, the Development Trust Association had a big handle on it. And now the locality, and I wondered where they fit in this. Do they not fit anymore, or are they still? I don't know. I'm asking that question because they did all. They supported a lot of this kind of thing 20 years ago.
Great. Okay, we'll come to those questions then before we answer the rest. Any more of them? We've got so Debbie's question about the shared life and how do we change the norm. Does anyone want to take that one? I think you briefly answered that, didn't you, Bill? But does anyone have any more they want to say?
Yeah, try not to have an economy where your pension's tied up in your house. There's a chances of that thing for overcoming the focus on home ownership. Because there is a history of shared housing and cooperative housing in Britain that we can forget sometimes. You know, it's just like the garden village movement, squatting movements even in the 70s and after the 40s, after the war. There's been histories of cooperative housing, there's been attempts as well. There have been attempts as well of the government or the establishment trying to promote cooperative housing, I think in the 60s and around the Edwardian times. But there's also been a recurrent issue of kind of like the great and good trying to jump onto small grassroots projects and then smothering it, which I think we've seen like quite a few times. So I think now there's probably more opportunity for people to think about alternatives because the present situation is just awful. But if we're moving ahead and we are trying to scale up the just rate and trying to avoid that smothering, you know, it's going to be one thing we need to think about.
There is home share.
Yes, and don't home share now.
Don't like that. When I came across when I was in Turin looking at co-housing, I was pointed out a block which had a lot of older people in it and a lot of students. And it was a large version of home share. They all each had their own sort of space, but the students had low rents because they gave 10 hours a week to the older residents.
No.
It's not that what you're talking about.
No, if you're in a property that could quite easily be adapted onto Cashing Hall to a ground floor flat suitable for aged or disabled and free up the top floor or loft for young people sharing, either making two separate flats. But if the original owner occupier sells their property to a housing cooperative of which they'd be a member, they would then have some disposable income instead of living in a house that's worth a lot of money and having to choose between equity release or downsizing and relocating. There must be some way of putting the two together. But there's no, the banks haven't come up with the product yet. I mean, you've got shared ownership in the way of you can buy a property now and you pay a rent and a mortgage, don't you, with some of these builders? You know what I'm talking about? Some of the small builders nowadays, because people can't afford the full mortgage. So they have a mortgage plus they're paying a bit of rent to the original builder, and then when that property is sold, the original builder actually takes some if there is profit. Right? So I'm looking for a way that I could sell my property to a housing cooperative, carry on living there, get help with the conversion, have some disposable income. Then when I pop my clogs and I need to go into care, you would hope that the cooperative would be in a position to purchase the remainder of that equity. Partly, the banks that will lend to housing cooperatives will only lend as much as Housing Benefit will pay. So if you don't have any money from crowdfunding or from the Bank of Mum and Dad, you can't purchase a property that's of a higher value. So if you've got the original person who's not got a mortgage, you would hope there would be some way that they could sell it to the housing cooperative, be a part of it, be a member of the housing
Sounds a
cooperative.
sensible model. I don't think any of us have got any particular expertise in this area. You might try the Confederation of Cooperative Housing. They might be able to advise on.
I've talked to everybody.
I mean, where would the cooperative get the money? That's, you know,
Sorry?
where would a cooperative get the money? They've got to get money capital from somewhere.
No, if you have no, but if they're getting a mortgage with Triodos, for example, who will lend to housing cooperatives, but they can't afford to buy the whole property and deal with the conversion, then the original owner occupiers retain some equity.
Yeah. No, I just want to say this is a really good question. I think it's really great. I want to try and sort of open it up a bit, but could you two sort of try and talk afterwards about this? I think definitely would be good. But yeah, if we have a conversation afterwards about that, I think it's definitely useful. Thank you very much. Okay, there was one more question from Jerry about CLTs and the locality question that we had. Does anyone want to say anything on that?
Locality still exists, and it's part of the national movement that is building this community-led housing togetherness. It's pretty much, I mean, it's well funded still, much better funded than the UK Cohousing Network, which hasn't got any funded. But it's still around, it's still very active.
Brilliant, okay. Now, I know we had some, so I want to do one more round of questions. So I know, Hannah, you had a question.
Just a quick one, this is quite a specific one, but I was wondering, Maria, your case, you mentioned that your flats are leasehold flats, so do you collectively own the freehold then?
The answer to that is no. The charity that gave us the money for the rental flats wanted to safeguard their money for the future in case the co-housing failed or stopped being co-housing. So they preferred that the housing association, who are the landlord for the 8 flats, became the overall freeholder. But actually we've got such a strange sort of legal setup that we are their landlord as well. They've got a 999-year lease on the place. Our leaseholders have got a 250-year lease, but Ouch Company Limited is the superior landlord. It was all sorts of strange legal things I've never fully understood in order to avoid having to pay stamp duty twice. If the first housing association, Hanover, had sold to the smaller housing association, and we then had bought off that smaller housing association, that would have been 2 lots of stamp duty. So it's a very strange hybrid kind of
I was
setup.
just wondering if you're at risk of rising ground rents, because that's a...
We don't pay any ground rent. And we've not hardly seen them since we moved in. I mean, they've got money for nothing really. They don't have to do anything much.
Brilliant. Okay, taking a couple more questions then before we wrap up. Okay.
Just sort of getting involved in some of this housing stuff. But one of the things that occurs to me with these sort of schemes where there is an intention to, where there's a specific group of people, targeted group of people who want to contribute in general different ways and so forth, is how is it planned to maintain that in the long term with new tenants, new changes of people and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, oh, I was just going to say, are there any more questions? We'll take some more questions before coming back to the panel for any more. Yeah.
So I'm not sure if this would be possible in your case, Maria, from what you just said, but it seems like there's a massive funding crisis in social housing, co-housing, community-led housing generally, and there's always talk about not being able to find any money, but in the big projects that you and other groups put together, surely you're creating quite a large asset base which you could borrow against to build another co-house. Are there any ideas, and maybe as well for the other panellists, for Lilac possibly to use that existing asset base to borrow against to build another co-house?
Right. And before I come back to the panel, are there any more questions? One final question. I can take that. And yeah.
I'm Dave Mitchell from Circle Court Tenants Association in Sheffield. We're just about to start actually after a few years off. What all this has demonstrated to me tonight is just what a complete and utter mess social housing is becoming in UK. And we've got a housing crisis now that's actually worse than Victorian times. I won't put it into context. But all the social gains since 1945, since the Labour government, have been completely wiped out. This is how serious it's becoming. As someone who grew up in the 20th century, I've actually seen society regress 100 years in the last 30. I find it very alarming. We've got retirement age going up. We've got mass social problems. We've got crime problems. We've got a government now that just does not believe in community or public service. And that is what we need to change. Because unless we change that, none of this is going to mean anything. Just look at Greater Manchester now. All the cranes, all private developers, all multinationals, all building properties for investment. They're not interested in the community. And this is now one of the most unaffordable cities outside London. And that is what we've got to address. And as far as local authorities are concerned, get it Labour Party, elect your own councillors. We'll change the council. If they're not representing our interests, let's change them. That's what elections are for.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we had Lynn's question about intentional community. So does anyone want to take that? I think a lot of you probably have quite a lot to say on that. No, the continuity sustainability of that community.
I can tell you what Ouch is doing. It is kind of established on the continent that co-housing communities that start off as pioneers with a lot of fervour, over decades, that fervour gets a bit adulterated. Kind of inevitable, really. I also think, in terms of senior co-housing, it's a question of having an age range. I've heard of groups that started in places like Germany that they all started at the age of 60, and 20 years later they were all 80. And that is not a key to good survival mechanism, really. We've got a range of 35 years in our group, from 52 to 88. Now, the succession policy that we put together is that we will maintain, well, the first Christmas we moved in, we had 400 emails from women asking either to move in or to move their mums in. There's a huge demand, but we don't have vacancies, and it's going to be sort of feet first vacancies that occur, really. So we have established from that 400 series of workshops that I ran, invited interest from women, and have got a group of around 12 women who straddle the leasehold and the social rental divide, who are all younger than 70, who are different ethnic mixes than ours, so that we diversify more. And they are all being encouraged, they've all got buddies in the Ouch group, and they are encouraged to come to communal meals, help cook them, help the gardening, to come to events, to come to their yoga sessions, to come to their film evenings or whatever, so that they are known and they get to know people and they get to know what co-housing is about. And thereafter they have to put in a formal application on paper, and then they're interviewed by 2 people from the group who then make a recommendation to the group. It takes at least 6 months. but it's a way of maintaining that succession. Plus, the Ouch Group is constantly revisiting its founding values. They're, I think, fairly unique like that. They've always had a system where every November, when they had to pay their membership fees again, they did a self-appraisal process around the values of the group. Are we still conforming to them? Should we add new ones? They're having a series of workshops over the next few weeks on their core values that they all share, and we'll revise them or we'll renew them. So it's a way of keeping that original spirit going. In terms of leasehold people's flats, when somebody dies, the question is, what then? Our legal requirements are that we are given by people's heirs at least 6 months to find an alternative buyer for the flat, and we agree with the heirs some middle price on independent valuations. But if we can't fill that flat in 6 months, they are entitled to sell it, but only to a woman over 50, and that person has to become a member of the Ouch Group. So that's, basically what we've done so far to try and protect the future of the group.
I think similar arrangements, some of the similar arrangements to the Ouch Group, but we're currently working on a policy for community participation, what's required for the members. And again, we've got a minimum 6-month period of people becoming members, so you become a prospective member for at least 6 months before you're able to apply for full membership. And I think it comes back to your question about sort of intergenerational stuff. Because diversity is one of our values, we did have an age range of about sort of 88 years, but unfortunately our oldest member died just after Christmas. So our youngest member now was twins at about 4 or 5 months, and then going up to sort of mid-70s. And it's built into our allocations policy, which is quite sort of complex, but we sort of require a spread of ages, and at the moment we're actually a bit short of 65 pluses, but we're well stocked up with 0 to 18s, 18s to 35s, and 35s to 64s. It's just the 65 pluses are a bit lower, but having that broader range of ages, I think, does actually help in a way with this, certainly replacing as people sort of fall out of the top end.
Thanks. I just want to say that this is all about policy inside your project. Manchester Urban Co-Housing has a set of vision and values. We drew those up as soon as we began work 5 years ago. We do keep them under review. We've also got an allocations policy. All of these policies can be found on our website. But actually that's the process. Until you get land, the process of community building deals with these issues. And I'd encourage you to have a look at the UK Co-Housing website, because there are lots and lots of case studies on there. There is also a series of fora in which you can post those kinds of questions and people will answer them. So even if you don't join UK Co-Housing, do have a look at their website, but I'd encourage you to join it.
Okay, we've got sort of 10 seconds on Lawrence's. Sorry, have you got 10?
I was just going to
pick
on some of that as well. Sorry, very quickly. I was just thinking about all those questions that were asked really, and I think naturally there's going to be a loss of momentum when people take a long time to either achieve the development or they achieve it and things go a bit flat. But I would put a challenge out there to say that if a bunch of people can get together and achieve something being built, they're pretty activated, aren't they, really? So, and I think that the theme that goes through, that once you're activated, you're going to want to do other things, whether that's challenge agents or whether that's get down to your local authority and say, what are you spending your reserves on, or get involved involved in housing or whatever. So this is kind of a bit of an exemplar. It shouldn't be a cul-de-sac where you just achieve what you've achieved and then quietly put your feet up. It's something that needs to be out there more, and I think it's a vehicle for change, really.
Thanks so much, Steve. Okay, so Lawrence's last question, we've got about a minute on this one, which is using your asset base to perhaps build more community-led housing, build more co-housing. Any ideas on that?
I think that's an excellent idea, but it wouldn't work in Archie's case because we don't hold the place in common ownership. So it would be, there's 17 different households in the leasehold side, but a cooperative, I would assume, that owns the land and owns the building would be able to raise money against it. I'm not really sure.
I've just mentioned Lancaster, which is a mixed tenure, I think, but principally owner-occupiers. But Lancaster have issued community shares, and I believe they're now planning to develop co-housing for older people alongside their intergenerational co-housing. So again, there's lots of examples, and it's about really just keeping an eye on things like locality and UK co-housing, and seeing what's in development. Much is in no position to do anything like that, and Ouch can't, but it is worth looking to see if anybody else within the 19, 20 projects that UK co-housing has got in development is in a position to do that.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I want to say a huge thank you to the panel. I think that the panel tonight has really shown us that there are alternatives to the current models, and especially, I think, for older people, shows how the current models really aren't working and aren't going to provide the sustainability that we really need. So yes, thank you very much, panel, and thanks very much. Just a couple of things before we get off. One thing is a feedback form at the back of your handout.